In 1872, inside a silent hall of the British Museum, a man who had spent his life cataloging dead civilizations suddenly lost all composure. George Smith, surrounded by clay tablets older than most nations, read a sequence of symbols that made him leap from his chair, his pulse racing as if history itself had reached out and grabbed him by the throat. What he was reading did not describe humanity rising toward greatness. It described humanity being made, not born, made. Why would the earliest writers in human history describe Earth as a place of confinement rather than a cradle? Why would they portray their creators not as eternal gods, but as tired beings who complained, argued, and feared rebellion? Why would a creation story focus on labor quotas, mining operations, and exhaustion instead of miracles and divine love? Why do these texts obsess over gold, genetics, and control rather than morality or salvation? And why do they describe humans as deliberately limited, short-lived, forgetful, obedient, if we were meant to inherit the world? If these tablets were only myths, why do they read like reports? If they were fantasies, why are they so unflattering to the human species? And if they were records, not stories, what does that mean for everything we think we know about who we are? Before we dive deeper, ignite that like button and prepare for the revelations to come. Tell me in the comments where you are listening from, what time it is there. And as always with our videos, the visuals are here to add context, but they aren't necessary to follow along. Thank you for always having our back. Prepare yourself, and let's dive in. The night George Smith lost control was not the result of poetry or myth, but of precision. The tablet in his hands did not speak in metaphor the way later religious texts would. It spoke in lists, sequences, and actions. It described decisions being made, problems arising, and solutions implemented. The language carried the tone of administration rather than worship, as if the writer assumed the reader already understood that the beings involved were real, physical, and flawed. Smith had spent years translating flood narratives and royal chronicles, but this was different. This was not about kings or gods ruling from an unseen realm. This was about supervisors, workers, and a system under strain. The civilization responsible for these records was not primitive by any reasonable standard. The Sumerians invented writing itself, not as art, but as accounting. Their earliest tablets tracked grain, labor, and resource distribution, the kind of bureaucracy that only emerges in complex, organized societies. They used a base 60 mathematical system that still survives in how humans measure time and angles today. They mapped the sky with such care that their star lists align with modern astronomical observations despite having no lenses or telescopes. This matters because it reframes everything they wrote. These were not people guessing at the universe. These were people documenting what they believed they had witnessed. Among the most unsettling claims in their texts is the assertion that humanity was not the first intelligent workforce on Earth. Before humans, the tablets say, there were the Igigi, a class of beings assigned to heavy labor. They dug canals, diverted rivers, and mined deep underground. The texts describe this work with striking familiarity. Long shifts, dangerous conditions, exhaustion accumulating over decades. After 40 years, a number repeated with unusual consistency, the Igigi revolted. They burned their tools, marched at night, and surrounded the residence of Enlil, the authority overseeing Earth operations. The tablets even preserve their complaint, describing the work as crushing and the suffering unbearable. This is not how gods are usually written about. This is how workers speak. The response to this rebellion was not immediate punishment, but panic. Gold extraction could not stop. The texts insist on this urgency, repeating that the material was essential to the survival of another world. Gold was not symbolic wealth. It was functional. Modern science understands gold as uniquely resistant to corrosion and effective at shielding radiation, properties that make it invaluable in spacecraft and atmospheric technologies. The Sumerian explanation, once dismissed as absurd, now sounds less impossible than it did a century ago. A planet with a deteriorating atmosphere would need exactly that kind of material in enormous quantities. Faced with rebellion, the leadership convened what the tablets describe as a council. This was not a divine gathering of omniscient beings, but a meeting where opinions clashed. Enlil favored force. Enki proposed innovation. Enki is consistently portrayed as a problem solver, associated with water, engineering, and biological knowledge. His solution was radical but efficient. Create a new worker, one adapted to Earth, capable of enduring labor that the Igigi could no longer tolerate. The texts describe this not as magic, but as a process involving experimentation. There were failures, beings that could not reproduce, bodies that malfunctioned, creatures born without clear sex or without control over basic bodily functions. These passages read disturbingly like early genetic trials, recorded by observers who lacked modern scientific vocabulary but clearly understood cause and effect. Eventually, the process succeeded. The being created was called the Lulu, often translated as the mixed one or the primitive worker. The tablets say this being was made by combining the essence of a young Anunnaki with the earthly material of an existing hominid. Clay, in this context, does not behave like a poetic symbol. It is shaped, mixed, placed into wombs, and carried to term. 14 birth goddesses are named, 7 producing males and 7 producing females, a detail so specific it borders on clinical. When the process worked, Enki declared the burden lifted from the Anunnaki and placed onto humanity. The relief is explicit. The work had been transferred. What follows is equally unsettling. Humans were not immediately free. They were confined to specific zones, supervised, and given tasks. The Eden, a word meaning plain or steppe, is described as a controlled area where humans tended fields and maintained systems established by their creators. Early humans are described as naked, eating grasses, unaware of higher knowledge. Over time, Enki intervened again, teaching agriculture, language, and craft. Each act of instruction created tension. Enlil viewed humans as tools, not students. Knowledge increased autonomy, and autonomy threatened control. This conflict between Enki and Enlil runs like a fault line through the tablets. Enki repeatedly aids humanity. Enlil repeatedly seeks to limit or eliminate it. When humans multiplied and grew loud, the texts say Enlil complained of noise disturbing his rest. His solution was population reduction. First through disease, then through drought, finally through flood. The flood narratives that later appear in the Epic of Gilgamesh and even the Hebrew Bible originate here, but their motive is different. The flood was not punishment for sin, it was an administrative reset. Enki's warning to Utnapishtim, delivered indirectly through a wall to avoid violating council orders, preserves the image of a being constrained by rules, choosing disobedience out of sympathy. After the flood, the Anunnaki watch from the sky, described as cowering and weeping as Earth is destroyed. Gods who cry are not abstractions. They are beings capable of fear. Another pattern emerges in the tablets when lifespan is discussed. The Anunnaki live for immense spans of time, measured in cycles foreign to humans. Humans age quickly, die young, and are replaced. This was not accidental. Some texts suggest lifespan was deliberately limited. Short lives prevent accumulation of power, memory, and coordination. Each generation begins again, easier to manage. The story of Adapa hints at this limitation being enforced intentionally, with immortality withheld to preserve hierarchy. By the time direct rule fades from the record, humans are left with kings claiming divine descent, laws modeled after Anunnaki decrees, and religious systems that institutionalize obedience. The creators retreat, but the structure remains. The tablets grow quieter, less detailed, as if the supervisors have stepped away and left the machinery running. What makes these accounts so disturbing is not that they describe gods descending from the sky. It is that they describe management, labor replacement, genetic modification, and control systems with uncomfortable clarity. They do not elevate humanity. They diminish it. They do not flatter the reader. They explain them. And that is precisely why they are so difficult to dismiss as fantasy. Myths are meant to inspire. These records do something else entirely. They explain why humanity works, why it struggles, and why it forgets. The story does not end with humanity's creation. It becomes more disturbing once humans begin to function exactly as intended. The tablets shift tone at this point, moving from experimentation to management. Humans are no longer described as curiosities, but as assets. They are counted, assigned, relocated. The language mirrors inventory, records more than sacred scripture. Entire passages focus on where humans are settled, what they are taught, and what they are forbidden to know. Knowledge itself becomes a regulated substance, distributed selectively to maintain order. The Eden is portrayed as the first containment zone, a carefully maintained environment where early humans labored under supervision. The word itself does not mean paradise. It refers to a flat, managed plain, irrigated and controlled. Humans worked the land, maintained gardens, and followed instructions they did not understand. The tablets describe them as compliant but limited, able to follow complex routines, yet incapable of abstract questioning. This balance appears intentional. Intelligence without independence is ideal for labor. Curiosity, however, is dangerous. As human numbers increased, the system expanded. New settlements were established, each tied to a function. Some humans worked fields, others assisted in workshops, others were assigned to mining regions. Southern Africa appears repeatedly in the texts as the location of the Abzu, a term that originally meant deep waters, but is used here to describe underground domains. Archaeologists later found ancient mining tunnels in this region dating back tens of thousands of years, far earlier than conventional history allows for organized mining. The tablets treat this as ordinary. Gold was extracted, transported, processed, and stored with logistical precision. The relationship between humans and their overseers was not purely mechanical. Enki's interventions continued, each one introducing instability. He taught humans how to cultivate crops efficiently, reducing dependence on direct oversight. He introduced tools, measurement, and eventually writing. Writing is especially significant. Once humans could record information, knowledge could persist beyond individual lifespans. Memory became externalized. This directly undermined one of the original control mechanisms, short life expectancy. Enlil's response was immediate. Writing was restricted. Temples became the gatekeepers of literacy. Only select humans were trained as scribes, ensuring that information flowed upward, not outward. The tablets repeatedly describe humans as noisy. This is not a metaphor. Noise represents unpredictability, growth beyond parameters, and the beginnings of autonomy. Large populations require coordination. Coordination breeds organization. Organization leads to power. Enlil's discomfort is not emotional, it is administrative. Humans are becoming difficult to manage. Plagues are introduced not as punishment, but as corrective measures. Disease reduces numbers without destroying infrastructure. Drought creates dependency. Famine breaks resistance. These are familiar tools of control, recognizable even in modern geopolitical strategy. The flood, however, was different. It was irreversible. The texts imply disagreement even among the Anunnaki. Some feared total loss of their workforce. Others prioritized silence and order over productivity. When Enki warns Utnapishtim, he does so indirectly, constrained by oath. This suggests a rigid hierarchy governed by law. Even powerful beings are bound by rules. After the flood, when humans survive, the tablets describe compromise. Humans are allowed to exist, but new controls are introduced. Lifespans are shortened further. Reproduction is regulated. Mortality becomes normalized. From this point onward, humans are no longer described as experimental. They are institutionalized. Kingship emerges, not as a human invention, but as a delegated authority. Human rulers claim descent from the Anunnaki, legitimizing their power through bloodline. These hybrid lineages, described in multiple texts, produce individuals taller, stronger, and longer lived than ordinary humans. They become the first dynasties. The biblical Nephilim appear briefly as shadows of this tradition, but the Sumerian records are explicit. These hybrids were unstable. They inspired loyalty and fear, but also resentment. Their existence blurred the boundary between tool and master. Religion becomes the most effective control mechanism. Temples are established not simply for worship, but for logistics. Humans bring food, goods, and labor to these centers. The gods are fed. This is not symbolic. The tablets describe offerings as necessary, implying biological dependence or at least habitual consumption. Ritual becomes routine labor framed as devotion. By ritualizing obedience, resistance is neutralized. Humans do not feel enslaved, they feel chosen. The Anunnaki presence gradually diminishes. The texts become less direct, more ceremonial. Instructions are codified into law. Direct intervention becomes rare. This withdrawal is ambiguous. Some tablets suggest the mission was completed. Others hint at internal conflict or resource depletion. A few imply that Earth became less suitable for long-term habitation by the Anunnaki. Their numbers decline. They depart to the heavens, promising return. What remains is a system designed to function without them. Human society evolves, but always within the parameters established early on. Labor remains central. Hierarchy persists. Short lifespans ensure turnover. Memory is fragmented across generations. Even myths preserve the memory of earlier overseers as gods who once walked among men. These memories are softened, romanticized, stripped of their administrative harshness. What began as management becomes theology. The most disturbing implication is continuity. The tablets do not describe liberation, they describe inheritance. Humans inherit the workload, the systems, and the limitations. Even after the overseers leave, the structure persists because it has been internalized. Humans enforce it upon themselves. Kings replace gods. Laws replace commands. Currency replaces rations. The function remains identical. Gold, once the literal objective, becomes symbolic wealth. Extraction continues. Labor continues. The planet is worked relentlessly. Humans do not ask why. They ask how much. This is the final achievement of the system described in the tablets. A workforce that no longer remembers it was designed to work. Control no longer requires supervision. The prison no longer needs walls. It exists as habit, belief, and inherited limitation. What the Sumerian tablets present is not a story of origins meant to inspire pride. It is an operational history. It explains why humanity organizes the way it does, why power concentrates, why labor is normalized, and why questioning the structure feels unnatural. The creators may have left, but their design did not. And designs, once embedded deeply enough, do not need their architects to remain functional. As the Anunnaki presence faded from direct interaction, the structure they imposed did not collapse. Instead, it hardened. Human civilization did not emerge freely. It crystallized around inherited instructions. The tablets reveal this transition subtly. Where earlier texts describe commands issued by non-human authorities, later texts show those commands embedded into law, ritual, and tradition. The overseers no longer needed to stand above humanity because humanity had learned to stand beneath itself. Kingship became the most effective replacement for direct rule. Human rulers were not chosen for wisdom alone, but for lineage. Blood mattered. Tablets list dynasties that ruled for impossibly long spans of time, reigns measured not in decades, but in centuries. Scholars often dismiss these figures as symbolic, but the texts do not treat them that way. They name cities, borders, conflicts, and successions. The implication is clear. Early kings were not ordinary humans. They were intermediaries, closer to the Anunnaki than to the laborers they governed. These rulers enforced systems that mirrored earlier oversight. Taxes replaced offerings, but the flow of resources remained upward. Corvée labor replaced forced labor, but the obligation was the same. Humans built cities, temples, roads, and monuments not because they desired them, but because authority demanded them. Even rebellion followed predictable patterns. When populations grew restless, suppression followed. When suppression failed, catastrophe was reframed as divine will. Religion evolved into a psychological infrastructure. The gods no longer needed to appear physically because belief alone was sufficient. Fear of divine punishment replaced fear of immediate overseers. Guilt replaced surveillance. Humans began to police themselves, judging their own thoughts and behaviors according to standards inherited from beings no longer present. The tablets describe this shift without commentary, as if it were expected. Control, once internalized, becomes self-sustaining. One of the most revealing patterns in the texts is how knowledge is treated. Knowledge is never presented as universally beneficial. It is segmented. Certain skills are taught widely: farming, construction, basic craftsmanship. Other knowledge is restricted. Astronomy, medicine, advanced mathematics. These remain the domain of priesthoods and elites. Knowledge hierarchy mirrors social hierarchy. Those who know more rule those who know less. This is not accidental. It ensures dependence. Writing itself becomes a gatekeeping mechanism. Literacy is rare. Scribes are trained within temple systems, loyal to authority. Records are kept not for transparency, but for control. Debt is tracked meticulously. Labor obligations are recorded. Punishments are standardized. Writing preserves inequality as efficiently as it preserves history. The tablets also reveal a chilling understanding of human psychology. Fear is leveraged constantly. Fear of gods, fear of famine, fear of exile, fear of death. Mortality, already biologically enforced, becomes culturally amplified. Death is portrayed as punishment, judgment, or failure. Humans become obsessed with appeasement. They sacrifice time, resources, even their children to secure favor from unseen powers. This emotional energy fuels obedience. Over generations, the original context is lost. Humans forget that the gods once argued, failed, and feared rebellion themselves. The Anunnaki are elevated into abstractions, omniscient, omnipotent, morally perfect. Their earlier flaws are edited out. What remains is authority without accountability. This transformation is perhaps the most profound manipulation recorded in the tablets. Memory is rewritten not through erasure, but through reverence. As civilizations spread, the pattern repeats. In Egypt, divine kingship mirrors Sumerian precedent. Pharaohs are gods in flesh, intermediaries between heaven and earth. In the Indus Valley, urban planning reflects centralized control without visible rulers, suggesting inherited administrative systems operating without overt force. In Mesoamerica, gods demand blood rather than grain, but the principle is identical. Humans exist to sustain higher powers. Despite geographic separation, these civilizations share striking similarities. Monumental architecture aligned with celestial events, labor-intensive construction requiring massive coordination, priest classes interpreting divine will, rulers claiming descent from the heavens. These are not coincidences. They are echoes of a template. The tablets hint that this template was deliberate. Humanity was not meant to be free-ranging. It was meant to function. Efficiency mattered more than happiness. Stability mattered more than truth. Even compassion, when shown, is framed as dangerous. Enki's gifts to humanity are consistently portrayed as destabilizing. Knowledge increases autonomy. Autonomy increases noise. Noise threatens order. Eventually, even Enki's influence wanes. The texts grow colder, more procedural. Humanity is on its own, but not liberated. It is like a machine left running after its operators depart. The inputs continue. The outputs continue. No one remembers why the machine exists, only that stopping it feels wrong. What is striking is how little has changed. Modern societies still revolve around labor extraction. Time is monetized, energy is consumed, lifespans are short relative to potential biological limits, knowledge remains stratified, fear remains central. Humans still build systems that exhaust them, justified by narratives they did not create. The tablets do not claim that humanity is evil or cursed. They claim humanity is designed. Designed systems behave predictably. They resist change. They optimize towards their original purpose even when conditions evolve. This is the unsettling implication left hanging in the clay records. If humanity was engineered to serve, then service will feel natural. Questioning it will feel like madness. Freedom will feel dangerous. By the time the Anunnaki disappear from the narrative entirely, their greatest achievement is complete. Humanity no longer needs overseers to enforce labor, hierarchy, and obedience. It has absorbed those functions into culture, belief, and identity. The prison does not require guards. The inmates maintain it themselves. The tablets end not with apocalypse or salvation, but with continuity. Cities rise and fall. Kings change. Gods are renamed. The structure persists. Humanity works, struggles, worships, and dies, generation after generation, never quite remembering that this pattern was once imposed deliberately. And designs that are forgotten are the hardest to escape because they no longer appear as constraints, but as reality itself. Long after the overseers vanished from the skies, their most effective creation remained intact. Limitation. Not chains, not walls, but biological boundaries embedded so deeply that humans mistook them for nature. The tablets imply that humanity's physical form was not optimized for freedom, but for endurance under constraint. When modern science began mapping the human body in detail, it uncovered anomalies that echo those ancient claims in unsettling ways. Human birth is uniquely traumatic among mammals. Other primates give birth with relative ease, yet human childbirth is prolonged, dangerous, and historically lethal. The standard explanation points to large brains and upright posture, creating a narrow pelvic canal. But this explanation assumes gradual adaptation. The fossil record tells a different story. Brain size expanded rapidly, while pelvic structure lagged behind. It is as if intelligence was increased without redesigning the frame meant to carry it, a sudden upgrade forced into an older chassis. The human body itself is fragile in ways that defy evolutionary logic. Humans lack protective fur, burn easily in sunlight, and are highly vulnerable to environmental extremes. Remove clothing, shelter, and tools, and humans struggle to survive in conditions other mammals handle instinctively. This is not the profile of a species shaped solely by natural selection. It resembles a being dependent on external systems, tools, and management. A worker species designed to operate within controlled environments rather than roam freely. The tablets describe humans as suited for labor, not longevity. Modern biology confirms this in chilling detail. Human cells divide only a limited number of times before senescence sets in, a process governed by structures called telomeres, protective caps that shorten with each division. This built-in expiration timer ensures aging and death. Yet nature offers many counterexamples. Certain jellyfish revert to juvenile states and avoid aging entirely. Some reptiles, trees, and whales live for centuries. The machinery for extreme longevity exists. Humans simply do not have access to it. Short lifespans prevent accumulation. Knowledge dies with each generation. Skills must be relearned. Revolutions lose momentum as leaders age and perish. From a control perspective, this is ideal. The tablets suggest this was intentional. Mortality is not framed as tragedy, but as necessity. Immortal workers would become unmanageable. Even human perception appears constrained. Humans perceive only a narrow band of electromagnetic radiation, a tiny slice of reality. We cannot see ultraviolet or infrared without instruments. We hear only a limited range of sound. Our senses filter reality aggressively. This filtering keeps awareness narrow and manageable. Many animals outperform humans in sensory domains essential for survival. Humans, by contrast, rely on tools to extend perception. Tools that must be built, maintained, and controlled. The brain itself is perhaps the most curious limitation. With roughly 86 billion neurons and trillions of potential connections, its theoretical capacity is immense. Yet everyday human consciousness operates within a remarkably narrow bandwidth. Creativity, intuition, and heightened awareness appear sporadically, often labeled anomalies or disorders. Savants demonstrate extraordinary memory or calculation when typical neural inhibition is bypassed. These abilities are not supernatural. They are latent, locked away. The tablets never explicitly describe consciousness modification, but they repeatedly emphasize obedience, forgetfulness, and noise suppression. Modern neuroscience reveals that the brain is not simply a generator of thought, but a filter. It reduces incoming information to maintain functionality. This filter can be altered chemically, through trauma, or through extreme states. When it is, humans report experiences that transcend ordinary perception. Encounters with non-human intelligences, vivid realms, overwhelming insight. These reports are strikingly consistent across cultures and eras. A naturally occurring compound called DMT, present in the human brain, can temporarily dissolve this filter. Under its influence, individuals often report entering structured environments populated by entities that seem autonomous and aware. These experiences are not random hallucinations. They exhibit coherence, continuity, and shared features across subjects. The existence of such a compound suggests that the human brain is capable of far more expansive awareness than it typically allows. Why would evolution produce such capacity only to suppress it? Suppression makes sense if awareness itself is dangerous. An aware worker questions purpose. An aware species resists control. The tablets hint that early humans were deliberately limited in understanding. Knowledge was given sparingly. Immortality was withheld. Perception was constrained. Genetics reinforces this picture. The human genome contains regions once dismissed as junk DNA, vast stretches that do not code for proteins. Modern research has overturned this assumption. These regions are now known to regulate gene expression, acting like switches and control systems. They determine when genes activate, how strongly, and under what conditions. This regulatory complexity exceeds what is necessary for basic survival. It resembles software more than biology. Within this genetic code, scientists have identified anomalies, genes with no clear evolutionary lineage, appearing suddenly and fully formed. Some researchers attribute this to horizontal gene transfer, a process common in bacteria but rare in complex organisms. Others admit the explanation is speculative. The data does not fit comfortably within established models. The most striking genetic anomaly is chromosome fusion. All great apes possess 48 chromosomes. Humans have 46. 2 ancestral chromosomes fused end to end. The evidence is visible. Remnants of telomeres in the middle of human chromosome 2 and 2 centromeres where one should exist. Natural fusions are possible, but they typically cause severe dysfunction. In humans, this fusion is universal and stable. It propagated across the entire species. The odds of this occurring naturally and successfully are vanishingly small. From an engineering perspective, reducing chromosome count simplifies reproduction and genetic control. It stabilizes inheritance. It is exactly the kind of modification one might implement when creating a new species from an existing template. The tablets describe humanity as a hybrid. Modern genetics quietly supports that possibility. Taken together, the body, the brain, and the genome paint a coherent picture. Humans are powerful but constrained, intelligent but forgetful, creative but short-lived, capable of awareness but rarely accessing it. These are not random traits, they are functional traits, optimized for labor within a managed system. The most unsettling aspect is how normal these limitations feel. Humans defend them as natural. Aging is inevitable. Death is necessary. Limited perception is reality. Questioning these assumptions invites ridicule, and that may be the final layer of control. A species that cannot imagine itself unbounded will never seek the key to its own design. The tablets never say humanity will awaken. They never promise liberation. They simply record what was done, what worked, and what persisted. And what persisted was not the presence of the overseers, but the boundaries they built into their creation. Boundaries that still define what it means to be human. If biological limitation was the foundation, psychological control became the architecture built upon it. The tablets reveal an understanding of the human mind that feels disturbingly modern. Control was never maintained through constant force. Force exhausts the controller. Instead, belief was cultivated, fear was refined, meaning itself was engineered. Over time, humans no longer needed to be told what to do. They felt compelled to do it. Religion was not introduced as spirituality. It emerged as structure. The earliest temples were not places of comfort or transcendence. They were logistical hubs. Grain storage, labor coordination, record-keeping, and ritual obligation converged in a single space. Humans brought offerings not out of gratitude, but requirement. The texts describe food prepared daily for the gods, clothes maintained, buildings cleaned, schedules enforced. Worship was work performed under a sacred label. Ritual served a deeper purpose than obedience. It synchronized behavior. Repetition ingrained habits. Chanting, kneeling, fasting, and sacrifice altered human neurochemistry, reinforcing submission and emotional dependency. Modern neuroscience confirms that ritual behavior reduces critical thinking and increases group cohesion. In the ancient world, this cohesion was directed upward. Unity did not empower humanity, it stabilized hierarchy. Fear was the primary emotional lever. Fear of divine punishment, fear of drought, fear of disease, fear of death. Mortality was framed not merely as an end, but as judgment. The afterlife became a continuation of control, a realm where obedience would be rewarded and disobedience punished. This belief ensured compliance even when no authority was present. Humans obeyed in solitude. The tablets imply that fear of death was intensified deliberately. Humans fear death more deeply than most animals, not just instinctively, but existentially. This fear drives behavior, suppresses rebellion, and prioritizes survival over truth. A being terrified of death will accept almost any condition to avoid it. Short lifespans combined with death anxiety produce populations that cling to authority for reassurance. As direct oversight faded, this fear-based system proved self-sustaining. Humans began enforcing it on one another. Priests replaced overseers, kings replaced gods, law replaced command. Each layer distanced authority from accountability. By the time the system was fully human-run, its origins were obscured. Control felt natural. Another psychological mechanism described indirectly in the tablets is fragmentation. Humans were divided geographically, linguistically, and culturally. Shared identity was limited to small groups. Larger unity threatened control. The myth of the Tower of Babel, originating from Mesopotamian tradition, preserves this memory in distorted form. Humanity united, communicated freely, and built upward. The response was fragmentation. Language was divided. Cooperation collapsed. Division ensured manageability. Modern societies replicate this endlessly. Nations, religions, ideologies, classes. Humans fight each other rather than examine the system they all inhabit. Conflict consumes energy that might otherwise be directed toward understanding. The tablets do not condemn conflict. They rely on it. The concept of time itself became a control mechanism. Human time is linear, scarce, and exhausting. Days are segmented. Lives are brief. Urgency dominates decision-making. Long-term thinking becomes difficult. Compare this to the Anunnaki conception of time, measured in vast cycles. A species trapped in short time frames cannot easily challenge systems designed over millennia. The most subtle mechanism of all is meaning inversion. Humans are taught that suffering is virtuous, that struggle builds character, that obedience is moral. Work becomes identity. Exhaustion becomes honor. Those who question the system are labeled lazy, heretical, or dangerous. This inversion ensures that resistance feels shameful. The tablets describe early humans as unaware of their condition. Awareness increases suffering, but ignorance preserves functionality. Over time, even memory of previous freedom disappears. Each generation is born into the system and mistakes it for reality. This is the most effective prison imaginable, one where the inmates defend the walls. Later philosophical traditions echo this idea unknowingly. Plato's cave describes prisoners mistaking shadows for truth. Eastern traditions speak of illusion, or Maya, as the fabric of perceived reality. Gnostic texts describe archons trapping souls through deception. These ideas do not originate in isolation. They are cultural afterimages of something much older. The notion of reincarnation appears repeatedly, but not always as a blessing. In some traditions, rebirth is described as a cycle to escape, not celebrate. Memory is erased between lives. Identity resets. The labor continues. From a systems perspective, this ensures continuity. A workforce that returns repeatedly, unaware of previous cycles, produces endless output. Emotional energy becomes the final commodity. Suffering, fear, love, grief. These intense states generate measurable neurological and physiological responses. Some researchers propose that consciousness itself produces energy in forms not yet understood. The tablets do not explicitly describe this, but they emphasize emotional control. The gods demand reverence, fear, loyalty. They react strongly to disrespect. Emotional output matters. When modern researchers like Robert Monroe described Earth as an energy farm, they unknowingly echoed ancient themes. Human society is structured to maximize emotional fluctuation. War, competition, scarcity, loss. Peace is brief. Stability is fragile. The system oscillates deliberately. By the time humanity fully governs itself, the architecture is complete. No external enforcers are required. Humans wake each day to labor, fear, consume, reproduce, and sleep. They celebrate this cycle as life. The original purpose is forgotten, but its function persists. The tablets never declare humanity evil or cursed. They describe humanity as useful. That distinction matters. Tools are not hated. They are utilized. and when a tool functions perfectly, its design is invisible. Humanity's greatest limitation is not strength or intelligence. It is the inability to recognize that the system it inhabits was never designed for its freedom. What remains is a species convinced that exhaustion is normal, fear is wisdom, obedience is morality, and limitation is nature. The overseers are gone. The machine runs on its own. And nothing is more efficient than a system that no longer needs its creators to enforce it. As belief systems solidified and biological limits held firm, the final layer of control emerged quietly. Environment. The tablets imply that Earth itself was never meant to be easily escaped, not merely as a consequence of physics, but as a functional boundary. Modern science calls it a gravity well, a term that sounds neutral but describes an inescapable reality. Everything on this planet is pulled downward, held in place by a force so absolute that leaving requires extraordinary energy. Humanity lives at the bottom of a cosmic pit. To escape Earth's gravity even briefly demands vast infrastructure, rare materials, and collective effort on a scale achievable only by powerful institutions. Individual escape is impossible. Even national escape is fragile. Humanity has barely reached its own moon, a neighbor suspended just out of reach. Mars remains a dream. The stars are effectively unreachable. For a species supposedly driven by curiosity, this confinement is total. The tablets describe the Anunnaki moving between worlds routinely. Their craft are said to rise vertically, cross great distances, and return on schedules measured in long cycles. For them, Earth was a work site, not a home. For humans, it is everything. The difference is not intelligence, it is access. One species came equipped to traverse space, the other was bound to soil. Even the planet's surface reinforces containment. Vast oceans separate land masses, isolating populations. Harsh climates dominate much of the globe. Deserts, frozen tundra, dense jungles. These environments slow movement, fragment societies, and limit cooperation. Early humans did not roam freely across the planet. They struggled to survive within narrow ecological bands. Civilization arose not from abundance, but from pressure. The tablets suggest that early infrastructure wasn't designed for human comfort, but for efficiency. Cities emerged near rivers for transport and irrigation. Populations clustered where labor could be extracted reliably. Over time, these clusters became dependent on systems they did not control. Agriculture required coordination. Coordination required authority. Authority required obedience. The cycle reinforced itself. As human societies industrialized, this environmental control evolved rather than disappeared. Cities grew denser. Life became faster. Time fragmented further. Artificial environments replaced natural rhythms. Humans moved indoors, under artificial light, disconnected from the cycles that once grounded awareness. Circadian disruption, chronic stress, and psychological fatigue became widespread. These conditions are not incidental. They are optimal for compliance. The air itself became controlled. Pollution altered atmosphere. Chemical exposure affected cognition and health. Nutrition shifted from natural diversity to processed uniformity. Bodies weakened. Minds dulled. Lifespans extended slightly through medicine, but vitality declined. People lived longer, but not better. Longevity without autonomy serves no liberating function. Technology, often framed as humanity's path to freedom, mirrors earlier gifts from Enki. It improves efficiency, but increases dependency. Tools become systems. Systems become necessities. Necessities become leverage. Electricity, networks, digital infrastructure. When these systems fail, life collapses. Humans are more powerful than ever, yet more fragile. Surveillance completes the loop. Where ancient overseers once watched physically, modern systems observe digitally. Data replaces sight. Algorithms replace judgment. Behavior is tracked, predicted, nudged. Control no longer requires force or belief alone. It is automated. Humans volunteer information, habits, preferences. The system learns faster than any ancient god. The tablets never describe total domination as necessary. Partial control suffices. Enough fear. Enough scarcity. Enough distraction. Humans do the rest. Modern environments are saturated with noise, information overload, and artificial urgency. Attention fractures. Deep thought becomes rare. Reflection feels indulgent. Awareness fades beneath constant stimulation. Sleep, once a natural reset, becomes compromised. Artificial light extends workdays. Stress disrupts rest. Dreams, a potential gateway to deeper awareness, are suppressed or forgotten. Even altered states of consciousness, once explored through ritual and plant medicine, are stigmatized or controlled. Anything that expands perception is regulated. The concept of freedom is redefined. Freedom becomes choice between products, not liberation from systems. Movement within boundaries is mistaken for escape. Humans celebrate minor conveniences while accepting existential confinement. The prison does not announce itself. It entertains. The tablets imply that Earth's role was never merely physical. It was psychological and energetic. A closed system where output could be predicted, labor extracted, emotion harvested, consciousness constrained. Modern physics speaks of closed systems and entropy. Human civilization appears optimized for energy expenditure with minimal awareness. The idea of return appears repeatedly in ancient texts. Gods who will come back, overseers who will reclaim authority. Whether literal or symbolic, the expectation itself maintains order. Humans wait. Waiting discourages action. Salvation postponed keeps labor ongoing. The future becomes a leash. Even rebellion is absorbed. Revolutions replace rulers but preserve structures. Flags change. Systems remain. Labor continues. Debt persists. Scarcity endures. The machine adapts. The tablets never record a successful human uprising against the creators. They record adjustments, compromises, resets. The system survives. What is most unsettling is how familiar all of this feels. None of it requires belief in ancient visitors to function. The mechanisms stand on their own. Biology limits lifespan. Psychology enforces fear. Environment restricts movement. Society extracts labor. Technology deepens dependency. Surveillance ensures compliance. Memory resets each generation. Whether the Anunnaki were literal beings or not becomes almost secondary. The system described in the tablets exists. It operates. It persists. Humanity behaves exactly as a designed workforce would. Busy, divided, exhausted, afraid, and convinced this is simply life. The tablets do not offer escape instructions. They document reality. They show how a system was built and why it worked. And perhaps that is the most dangerous knowledge of all. Not that humanity was created to serve, but that it still does, flawlessly, long after the original architects disappeared. A prison does not require walls if escape feels impossible. It does not require guards if inmates police themselves. And it does not require creators if the design is perfect. Earth remains operational. humanity remains productive. The system endures. As the system matured, something unexpected occurred. Anomalies. Not widespread rebellion, not mass awakening, but fractures. Individuals appeared throughout history who did not fit the intended pattern. They questioned authority instinctively. They perceived connections others missed. They rejected fear-based obedience, even at personal cost. The tablets do not name these people directly, but later traditions preserve echoes of them as prophets, madmen, heretics, and visionaries. These anomalies were dangerous not because of violence, but because of clarity. They saw through the narratives that sustained control. They spoke of inner freedom, of knowledge within, of authority as illusion. Their words destabilized systems built on obedience. Predictably, they were marginalized, exiled, imprisoned, or executed. Control does not tolerate mirrors. Throughout history, such individuals emerge cyclically. In ancient Mesopotamia, scribes occasionally recorded dissenting interpretations, only for those tablets to disappear from public collections. In Greece, philosophers who questioned divine authority were condemned for corrupting youth. In Rome, mystics who preached internal sovereignty were executed. In medieval Europe, those who bypassed institutional religion were burned. The pattern is consistent. Awareness threatens structure. The system adapts by absorbing and reframing dissent. Rebels become symbols. Teachings are sanitized. Radical messages are softened into moral platitudes. The figure is revered, but the meaning is stripped of power. What began as liberation becomes doctrine. Doctrine becomes control. This absorption mechanism is one of the system's greatest strengths. It does not fight opposition directly. It incorporates it. A message of freedom becomes a new hierarchy. A critique of authority becomes a new institution. Even revolution becomes ritualized. Humans overthrow rulers only to replicate the same structures under new names. The tablets hint that this adaptability was anticipated. Humanity was designed to innovate within limits. Creativity improves efficiency. Curiosity solves problems. But both are constrained by fear and fragmentation. True autonomy never spreads far enough to destabilize the whole. One of the most effective suppressors of awakening is distraction. Modern environments are saturated with stimuli engineered to capture attention. Endless information replaces understanding. Entertainment replaces reflection. Novelty replaces depth. Humans are busy consuming narratives instead of examining reality. Time scarcity intensifies this effect. Humans feel perpetually behind, rushed, overwhelmed. Deep thought requires stillness. Stillness becomes rare. Silence feels uncomfortable. The mind, deprived of rest, defaults to habitual patterns. Control thrives in noise. The tablets describe early humans as noisy in a literal sense, but the metaphor extends. Noise is not just sound. It is mental clutter, emotional turbulence, conflicting signals. A noisy mind cannot perceive structure. It reacts rather than observes. Dreams represent another anomaly. In drums, the filters loosen, symbols emerge, memories recombine. Some individuals report consistent dream experiences that feel instructional or revelatory. Ancient cultures treated dreams as communication channels. Modern society dismisses them as meaningless. Suppressing dream significance removes another avenue of insight. Psychoactive plants once used in ritual contexts to expand awareness were gradually outlawed or stigmatized. These substances bypass cognitive filters temporarily, often producing experiences of unity, insight, and loss of fear. Such states undermine control. They are framed as dangerous, chaotic, or immoral. Regulation replaces exploration. Even language plays a role. Words shape perception. Modern language prioritizes objects, ownership, and identity. Processes, relationships, and impermanence are minimized. This reinforces ego boundaries. A fragmented self is easier to control than an integrated one. Education systems further reinforce limitation. Knowledge is compartmentalized. Critical thinking is encouraged only within safe bounds. Historical narratives are simplified. Complexity is avoided. Students are trained to function, not to question fundamentals. Curiosity becomes career-focused rather than existential. The tablet suggests that early humans were intentionally prevented from asking certain questions. Knowledge of origins, of purpose, of design was restricted. Modern society continues this pattern. Questions about consciousness, existence, and systemic control are marginalized as impractical or unscientific. Yet anomalies persist. Individuals experience spontaneous awakenings through trauma, meditation, near-death experiences, or altered states. These events often produce similar realizations. Fear diminishes, identity expands, authority loses its grip. The person feels disconnected from the system's emotional hooks. Such individuals often struggle to reintegrate. Society lacks frameworks to support genuine awakening. Instead, experiences are pathologized or trivialized. The awakened individual becomes isolated, reducing the spread of insight. Isolation neutralizes threat. The system does not need to eliminate anomalies completely. It only needs to keep them rare, scattered, and unsupported. A lone, awakened mind changes little. A connected network would be dangerous. Fragmentation prevents that network from forming. Technology, ironically, could enable such connection. But it is structured to do the opposite. Algorithms prioritize engagement over truth. Outrage spreads faster than insight. Echo chambers form. Division deepens. The same tool that could unify awareness is used to fracture it further. The tablets never suggest that humanity would awaken collectively. They suggest management, adjustment, continuation. Any anomaly is treated as noise within acceptable margins. Systems are built to absorb noise without failing. Perhaps the most telling sign of control is how alien freedom feels. Many humans equate freedom with chaos, danger, or irresponsibility. Stability is preferred even when it is oppressive. This preference is conditioned. A being trained for labor values predictability over possibility. The anomalies remind us that something else is possible. That perception can widen, that fear can dissolve, that identity can loosen. But possibility alone is not enough. Without support, without memory, without continuity across generations, awakening resets with each death. The tablets emphasize memory repeatedly. Records are kept, names preserved, events catalogued. Memory sustains power. Humanity's memory is fragmented by design. History is rewritten. Lessons are lost. Each generation begins again, and so the anomalies flicker and fade. A mystic here, a philosopher there, a rebel briefly remembered. The system continues, efficient, stable, invisible. The presence of anomalies does not disprove design. It confirms tolerance thresholds. No system is perfectly closed. What matters is that deviation never reaches critical mass. And for thousands of years, it has not. Humanity remains largely asleep not because it lacks intelligence, but because it lacks continuity of awareness. The system resets before insight accumulates. That may be the final safeguard built into the design. Awakening is possible. Sustained awakening is rare. And that difference is everything. Beneath the surface of human history lies a pattern so consistent it almost disappears into normality. Repetition. Civilizations rise, peak, collapse, and are replaced, each time rediscovering fragments of knowledge thought lost forever. The tablets frame this not as accident, but as function. Cycles prevent accumulation. Cycles erase memory. Cycles ensure that no generation advances far enough to destabilize the system as a whole. The earliest cities appear suddenly in the archaeological record, already complex. Writing, law, astronomy, metallurgy, and organized religion emerge together rather than gradually. This clustering defies standard models of slow cultural evolution. The tablets explain it simply. Knowledge was transferred. Humanity did not invent civilization from nothing. It inherited a framework, then operated within it until collapse reset the board. Collapse is never portrayed as failure. It is portrayed as correction. Floods, fires, plagues, invasions. Each catastrophe reduces population, destroys records, and fractures continuity. Survivors rebuild using fragments of old systems, mistaking them for new discoveries. Progress resumes, but from a lower baseline. Memory fades. The cycle continues. Modern geology confirms that Earth has experienced repeated global disruptions. Ice ages, sudden warming events, massive floods. These events are treated as natural disasters, but their timing aligns eerily with mythological resets across cultures. Ancient stories do not describe random destruction. They describe judgment, cleansing, renewal. The language differs, but the outcome is the same. Loss of continuity. The Great Flood narrative appears across continents, preserved by cultures with no contact. The details vary, but the structure is identical. A warning, a chosen survivor, preservation of life, a new beginning. This consistency suggests shared memory, not coincidence. Memory of a reset so profound it imprinted itself globally. After each reset, knowledge fragments persist. Monumental architecture appears where it should not exist. Precision stonework emerges in societies supposedly lacking the tools to create it. Astronomical alignments demonstrate advanced understanding of cycles, far exceeding the needs of agriculture. These anomalies are treated as mysteries. The tablets treat them as leftovers. Structures like Göbekli Tepe, buried deliberately thousands of years ago, challenge linear history. Its builders organized massive labor, carved intricate symbolism, and aligned structures astronomically long before farming was established. This inversion makes sense only if agriculture was not the starting point, but a later adaptation after loss. Similarly, sites like the Great Pyramid exhibit precision that exceeds the capabilities of the era assigned to them. Perfect alignment to cardinal directions. Mathematical constants embedded in proportions. Stone blocks moved and placed with tolerances difficult even today. The official narrative attributes this to ingenuity and lost techniques. The tablets imply inheritance. Inheritance does not require understanding. Humans can operate systems they did not design. They can follow rituals whose origins they have forgotten. They can build according to patterns passed down without knowing why. This is how technology survives collapse. This is also how control persists. Each cycle produces elites who guard knowledge, priesthoods, royal lineages, secret schools. These groups preserve fragments of the old system while presenting themselves as chosen or enlightened. Knowledge becomes currency. Access is restricted. Power concentrates. Eventually, inequality breeds instability. Collapse follows. The pattern resets. What never resets is the underlying structure: hierarchy, labor extraction, fear-based belief, short lifespans, fragmented memory. These constants survive every civilization. They are not cultural accidents. They are system requirements. The tablets suggest that even human curiosity is cyclical. Periods of inquiry arise, followed by suppression. Libraries burn. Scholars are silenced. Dogma replaces exploration. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria symbolizes this perfectly. Knowledge accumulated across centuries vanished in smoke. Humanity began again, poorer in memory. Modern digital technology creates the illusion of permanence. Data seems indestructible, yet it is fragile. Servers require power. Formats become obsolete. Information overload buries insight. Memory is abundant but shallow. Collapse in a digital age would erase more than any fire ever could. The cycle adapts to technology. Control mechanisms evolve. Instead of priests, algorithms. Instead of temples, platforms. Instead of rituals, habits. The effect is identical. Attention is harvested. Labor is extracted. Awareness is fragmented. The tablets do not describe a final end to cycles. They imply sustainability. A system designed to endure does not allow runaway progress. It allows enough advancement to maintain efficiency, but not enough to break containment. Humanity advances in tools, not in autonomy. Even scientific paradigms reflect this. Research is funded where it benefits existing structures. Radical questions are marginalized. Consciousness remains poorly understood despite being central to experience. Physics advances while meaning stagnates. Knowledge expands outward, not inward. The most dangerous knowledge is not technological. It is self-knowledge. Awareness of design undermines compliance. That is why history is taught as accidental rather than intentional. Systems appear emergent rather than engineered. Responsibility dissolves into randomness. The cycles ensure plausible deniability. No single generation can point to the architects. No continuous record survives long enough to establish intent. What remains are myths, dismissed as fantasy. Clay tablets, fragmented and incomplete, stored in basements and archives. Yet the pattern remains visible to those who look across cycles rather than within them. Civilization is not progressing toward freedom. It is oscillating within boundaries. Tools change, masters change, the system does not. The tablets record no outrage at this. They do not moralize. They observe. They document. They describe what works, and what works is forgetting. Forgetting origins, forgetting alternatives, forgetting that life could be structured differently. Each cycle reinforces the belief that the current arrangement is inevitable, that this is how humans are, that this is how the world works. The greatest achievement of the system is not control of bodies or minds, but control of imagination. A species that cannot imagine freedom will never seek it. Cycles ensure that imagination never accumulates enough momentum to escape the gravity of design. Civilizations will continue to rise and fall. Technologies will advance and vanish. Knowledge will be rediscovered and lost. Through it all, humanity will remain productive, obedient, and convinced it is moving forward. The tablets do not predict an end to this pattern. They record its success. And that perhaps is the most unsettling legacy they leave behind. Memory is the one resource the system cannot allow to accumulate unchecked. The tablets imply this through omission as much as through description. They record events meticulously, yet they assume forgetting. Humans are expected to lose context, to inherit fragments without understanding their origin. Memory, when preserved across generations, becomes dangerous. It allows comparison. It exposes patterns. It reveals intent. Human memory is biologically fragile. Trauma erases. Stress narrows recall. Aging dissolves detail. Even at the individual level, memory is unreliable. At the collective level, it is almost non-existent. Civilizations remember myths, not mechanisms. Heroes, not systems. This selective remembrance is not accidental. It is reinforced continuously. Writing should have solved this problem. Yet writing is controlled. Archives are centralized. Interpretation is mediated. History is curated. What survives is what supports continuity of the structure. What challenges it is labeled heresy, conspiracy, or madness. The tablets themselves survived only because they were buried, forgotten, and rediscovered accidentally. Even then, only fragments are translated. Context is lost. Meaning is diluted. Modern society believes itself immune to this fragility. Digital memory appears infinite. Everything is recorded. Nothing is forgotten. But abundance produces a different kind of erasure. When information is endless, attention collapses. Signal drowns in noise. Memory becomes external, not embodied. Humans no longer remember. They retrieve. Retrieval replaces understanding. Algorithms decide what is seen, what is remembered, what is reinforced. They optimize engagement, not insight. Emotional extremes spread faster than nuance. Fear, outrage, and identity affirmation dominate. These emotional states mirror the ancient control mechanisms described in the tablets. Technology has not freed humanity from psychological leverage. It has refined it. Identity itself becomes a containment strategy. Humans define themselves through labels: nationality, ideology, profession, belief. Identity narrows perception. It filters information automatically. Anything that threatens identity is rejected. This self-defense mechanism prevents destabilizing insights from taking root. A system that convinces its components to defend it does not need force. The tablets suggest that early humans were deliberately denied knowledge of their origins. This denial persists. Questions about human purpose are redirected toward productivity, consumption, or faith. Existential curiosity is framed as impractical. Children ask fundamental questions instinctively. Education trains them out of it. Language reinforces this. Words for freedom are abstract. Words for obligation are concrete. Time is measured precisely. Experience is not. Humans speak fluently about schedules, deadlines, and goals, but struggle to articulate awareness or presence. What cannot be named cannot be shared easily. Isolation follows. Dreams once served as a memory bridge. Ancient cultures recorded dreams, shared them, interpreted them collectively. Dreams connected individuals to deeper layers of experience. Modern culture dismisses dreams as random. Sleep itself is devalued. Productivity encroaches. The subconscious loses a voice. Ritual death rites once emphasized remembrance. Ancestors were honored. Lineage mattered. Memory extended beyond a single lifespan. Modern societies outsource death to institutions. Grief is privatized. Ancestors are forgotten within a generation. continuity dissolves. Reincarnation beliefs, where they persist, often include enforced amnesia. Souls return without memory of previous lives. Whether literal or metaphorical, this mirrors the system's needs perfectly. Experience resets. Lessons must be relearned. Progress stalls. Even spiritual traditions that acknowledge rebirth rarely address the problem of forgetting. Forgetting is treated as feature, not flaw. The tablets do not romanticize this. They treat memory loss as operational necessity. Workers who remember too much become inefficient. Awareness disrupts obedience. Even the Anunnaki themselves appear constrained by memory structures, bound to cycles, hierarchies, and rules they did not fully escape. Human lifespan compounds the problem. 70 or 80 years is insufficient for deep systemic understanding, especially when most of that time is consumed by survival. Childhood dependency, adult labor, and elderly decline leave little space for reflection. By the time insight emerges, death intervenes. This is not simply unfortunate. It is functional. A species designed for labor benefits from rapid turnover. Each generation starts fresh, unburdened by the accumulated dissatisfaction of the last. Cultural memory resets just enough to maintain stability. Attempts to preserve memory through art, philosophy, or mysticism survive only in fragments. Sacred texts are edited. Philosophies are simplified. Mystical insights are institutionalized. What remains is safe. What is dangerous is forgotten. Even scientific progress follows this pattern. Paradigms shift only when old generations die. Resistance persists not because of evidence, but because of identity and investment. Knowledge advances one funeral at a time. This biological bottleneck limits the speed of transformation. The tablets hint that memory could be expanded. Enki's gifts often involve remembrance, awareness, and skill transmission. Enlil's objections focus on noise, proliferation, and loss of control. Memory threatens hierarchy. Forgetting preserves it. Modern neuroscience confirms that memory is plastic. It can be enhanced, suppressed, altered. Trauma suppresses memory. Meditation enhances recall and integration. Psychedelic states can retrieve forgotten experiences. These states are marginalized. The system favors forgetfulness. Even trauma itself becomes a tool. Traumatized populations focus on survival. Memory narrows. Fear dominates. Large-scale trauma events reset societies. Wars, disasters, economic collapses. Afterward, populations accept new structures gratefully. Memory of alternatives fades. The system does not require constant catastrophe. Low-level stress suffices. Chronic anxiety, financial insecurity, social comparison. These conditions degrade memory subtly. Attention fragments. Presence dissolves. Life becomes reactive. The tablets record none of this explicitly. They do not need to. They describe inputs and outputs. What they show is a system that depends on human forgetfulness to function. And it has functioned for a very long time. Humanity believes itself at the peak of knowledge, yet it forgets its own past repeatedly. It rediscovers old truths as new insights. It repeats mistakes with confidence. This is not ignorance. It is engineered amnesia. A species that remembers its design would question its purpose. A species that forgets accepts it. Memory, not strength or intelligence, is the true threat to the system. And memory, more than any other human capacity, has been carefully constrained. The tablets survive as broken witnesses. Enough to unsettle, not enough to liberate. Perhaps that is intentional too. At some point, control no longer needed justification. It became invisible. The system did not announce itself as a system. It presented itself as reality. By the time humans could reflect on their condition, the boundaries felt natural, inevitable, even comforting. This is the stage the tablets imply was the most stable, when obedience no longer feels imposed, but chosen. Modern humans often believe they are freer than any generation before them. They can travel, speak, consume, and express themselves in unprecedented ways. Yet the core structure remains unchanged. Time is still owned. Labor is still extracted. Survival is still conditional. The difference is aesthetic. The chains are lighter, polished, disguised as opportunity. Currency replaces rationing, but the dependency is identical. Without money, life collapses. Shelter, food, healthcare, security, all mediated by participation in the system. This ensures compliance without coercion. Humans do not need to be forced to work. They must, or they perish. The tablets describe earlier versions of this explicitly. Modern society perfected it. Debt becomes the most effective leash. Ancient texts record obligations measured in grain and labor days. Modern debt is abstract, numerical, infinite. It binds future time. A person in debt has already surrendered years of labor not yet lived. This extends control beyond the present moment into imagined futures. Fear shifts from immediate punishment to lifelong anxiety. Work itself becomes identity. Humans introduce themselves by occupation. Worth is measured by productivity. Idleness is shameful. Exhaustion is normal. This normalization is critical. A tired population does not revolt. It sleeps when it can. It distracts itself when awake. It does not plan. Technology accelerates this exhaustion. Constant connectivity erases boundaries between labor and rest. Notifications replace silence. Attention is monetized. The mind is fragmented into moments too short for insight. The tablets describe noise as a problem. Modern noise is internal. Choice overload further weakens autonomy. When everything is possible, nothing is examined deeply. Decision fatigue sets in. People defer to defaults. Defaults are designed by institutions. Control hides inside convenience. The illusion of upward mobility maintains hope. Some rise. Most do not. The possibility sustains effort. The rarity of success reinforces hierarchy by making it appear earned. Those who fail blame themselves, not the structure. Shame replaces anger. The tablets hint that the Anunnaki understood motivation deeply. Reward systems were more effective than punishment. Humans were given small privileges, incremental improvements, symbolic status. Modern society mirrors this. Titles, promotions, social validation. Enough reward to continue, not enough to escape. Fear remains the underlying motivator. Fear of poverty, fear of exclusion, fear of failure, fear of death. Media amplifies this constantly. Crises cycle. Threats loom. Stability feels fragile. Under fear, people accept restrictions willingly. Security becomes more valuable than freedom. Authority becomes diffuse. No single ruler can be blamed. Corporations, governments, institutions, markets, responsibility disperses. The system cannot be confronted because it has no face. This diffusion is the final evolution of control. Even rebellion is commodified. Counterculture becomes fashion. Dissent becomes content. Critique becomes entertainment. Anger is vented harmlessly. The system profits from its own opposition. The tablets imply earlier rebellions were crushed or redirected. Modern rebellion is absorbed. Language shifts subtly. Exploitation becomes opportunity. Surveillance becomes safety. Compliance becomes responsibility. Words soften reality. Humans internalize these definitions. Thought follows language. Control embeds itself linguistically. Education reinforces this worldview. Success is framed narrowly. Curiosity is encouraged only when profitable. Philosophy becomes optional. History becomes simplified. Systemic critique is rare. Students are trained for roles, not awareness. Healthcare extends life without restoring vitality. People live longer within the system, contributing longer, but rarely healthier. Aging is medicalized. Death is postponed, not transcended. Longevity without liberation serves productivity. Even spirituality is optimized. Mindfulness is marketed for stress reduction, not awakening. Meditation is used to improve performance, not dissolve identity. Ancient practices are stripped of transformative potential and repurposed to stabilize workers. Calm becomes compliance. The tablet suggests that once humanity internalized control, direct oversight was unnecessary. The system self-corrected. Deviations were minor. Major disruption became unlikely. Modern society represents this phase fully realized. People defend the system passionately. They identify with it. Critique feels like personal attack. This is the ultimate success of design, when the controlled become guardians of control. The most powerful illusion is that of inevitability. Humans are taught that this is the only way things can work. Alternatives are unrealistic. History is framed as progress toward this moment. Any suffering is temporary. Any critique is naive. Yet beneath this certainty lies unease. Burnout is widespread, depression common, anxiety endemic. These are treated as individual pathologies rather than systemic symptoms. Medication replaces examination. Functionality is restored. Questions are deferred. The tablets never describe happiness as a goal. They describe stability, productivity, and order. Modern society reflects the same priorities. Happiness is marketed, not cultivated. Fulfillment is promised, not delivered. What remains is a species that works continuously, consumes endlessly, and wonders quietly why satisfaction never arrives. The system provides answers that point outward. More effort, more achievement, more acquisition. The emptiness persists. This emptiness is not accidental. A fulfilled being does not strive endlessly. Dissatisfaction fuels labor. Desire drives productivity. The system depends on lack. The most profound control is not oppression, but orientation. Humans are oriented toward external validation, external goals, external threats. Inner freedom becomes irrelevant. Awareness becomes distraction. The tablets record the success of this orientation without commentary. They simply show that once established, it persists. The creators depart. The system remains. Humanity becomes both worker and warden, prisoner and guard. Control no longer needs enforcers. It has become culture. And culture, once internalized, is indistinguishable from reality itself. Despite the apparent completeness of the system, cracks persist, not in structure, but in experience. Humans continue to feel that something is wrong, even when they cannot articulate what it is. This dissatisfaction does not stem from lack of comfort alone. It emerges even in abundance, even in safety, even in success. The tablets never address this feeling directly, yet they explain it implicitly. A being designed for function, but capable of awareness, will always sense the gap between purpose and potential. Throughout history, Moments arise when this discomfort intensifies collectively. Periods of rapid questioning follow wars, collapses, and existential shocks. Old beliefs fail. Authority loses credibility. Humans look inward, if only briefly. These moments are dangerous for any system based on obedience. The tablets imply that such periods were monitored carefully in antiquity, often followed by resets, reforms, or redirected narratives. Modern society experiences these moments frequently. Crises expose fragility, institutions falter, trust erodes. For a short time, people question assumptions about work, value, and meaning. Then the system responds. New narratives emerge, reforms are promised, superficial changes restore confidence. The deeper structure remains untouched. One reason dissatisfaction persists is misattribution. Humans are taught to blame themselves. If life feels empty, they're told to work harder, improve themselves, optimize habits. Personal failure replaces systemic critique. Shame internalizes discontent, preventing collective insight. Psychology as a discipline often reinforces this framing. Emotional distress is individualized. Chemical imbalance replaces existential inquiry. Treatment aims to restore functionality, not understanding. The goal is return to productivity, not awakening. The tablets hint that early overseers understood this mechanism well. Discomfort was tolerated, even useful, as long as it did not coalesce into awareness. Suffering motivates labor. Meaninglessness drives distraction. Only clarity threatens control. The search for meaning is redirected toward external goals: career, family, nation, belief. These provide temporary fulfillment, but none address the underlying sense of misalignment. When they fail, humans feel guilt rather than insight. Even love is shaped by the system. Romantic ideals promise completion through another person. When this fails, disappointment reinforces dependence rather than autonomy. Attachment becomes another anchor. Loss becomes another source of fear. The tablets describe humans as social beings, designed to work collectively, but not consciously. Social bonds enhance productivity and stability. They also create leverage. Fear of exclusion becomes powerful. Conformity ensures survival. Modern social structures amplify this. Social media transforms connection into performance. Validation becomes quantifiable. Approval becomes addictive. Identity becomes fragile, dependent on feedback. This vulnerability is exploitable. The persistence of dissatisfaction is thus paradoxical. It is both symptom and safeguard. Too much dissatisfaction destabilizes. Too little breeds stagnation. The system tolerates a narrow band of unrest, enough to motivate, not enough to awaken. Occasionally, individuals cross that threshold. They disengage from the race. They question assumptions deeply. They reorient values. These individuals often struggle materially and socially. The system does not need to punish them aggressively. Marginalization suffices. The tablets imply that early humans who withdrew from assigned roles were considered failures, not threats, unless they gathered followers. Isolation neutralized risk. Modern society replicates this. Alternative lifestyles are permitted but discouraged. They are framed as impractical or irresponsible. Spiritual traditions often emerge from such withdrawals: hermits, monks, ascetics. These figures step outside productivity, seeking truth. Over time, their practices are institutionalized, stripped of radical potential, and reintegrated into the system as acceptable outlets. The most dangerous insight is not that the system is oppressive, but that it is unnecessary. Humans could organize differently. They could prioritize awareness over accumulation, cooperation over competition, enough over endless growth. This realization undermines the core logic of the design. The tablets never depict such alternatives being implemented. They record attempts, conflicts, and resets. Stability always wins. Productivity always returns. The system favors endurance over truth. Modern environmental crises highlight this tension. The planet's limits are visible. Endless growth is unsustainable. Yet change is slow. The system prioritizes short-term productivity over long-term survival. This mirrors earlier patterns described in the tablets. Resource extraction continued despite consequences. Humanity is aware of the danger, yet unable to act collectively. Fragmentation prevents coordination. Fear of loss overrides fear of collapse. The system's incentives remain intact. Technology offers potential escape routes, but also reinforces dependency. Artificial intelligence, automation, and digital networks could reduce labor. Instead, they increase surveillance, efficiency, and inequality. Productivity rises. Freedom does not. The tablets suggest that tools were always double-edged. Gifts improved capacity but deepened reliance. Enki's generosity advanced humanity but destabilized control. Modern technology follows the same pattern, offering glimpses of liberation while tightening constraints. The dissatisfaction many feel today is thus not new. It is ancient. It is the residue of awareness pressing against design. It surfaces as anxiety, depression, existential dread. These are not individual defects, they are signals. The system responds by pathologizing these signals. Medication numbs them. Entertainment distracts. Work exhausts. The signals fade. Function resumes. Yet the signals return. They always do. Because awareness cannot be erased entirely, it can only be delayed, fragmented, and redirected. The tablets end many narratives abruptly, as if assuming the reader understands the outcome. Humanity continues. The system persists. Dissatisfaction remains unresolved. This unresolved tension may be the most human thing left. Not intelligence, not creativity, but the quiet sense that life is more than survival and service, that existence could be oriented differently. Whether that sense will ever coalesce into sustained change remains uncertain. The tablets do not predict awakening. They document containment, but they also document struggle, conflict, and compromise. The system is stable, not absolute. Human dissatisfaction is the echo of potential. It is the whisper that something has been forgotten. The system relies on that whisper never becoming a voice. So far, it has succeeded. If dissatisfaction is the symptom, then fear is the stabilizer. The tablets treat fear not as an emotion to be eliminated, but as a resource to be managed. Fear shapes behavior more reliably than reward. It narrows perception, accelerates compliance, and suppresses long-term thinking. A fearful species does not rebel strategically. It reacts tactically. This distinction matters. From the earliest records, fear is woven into every layer of human life. Fear of gods, fear of nature, fear of other humans, fear of death. Each fear reinforces the others, creating a closed loop. Remove one, and the system compensates with another. The tablets imply that this redundancy was intentional. Death occupies a central role. Humans do not merely fear dying, they fear what comes after. Judgment, punishment, annihilation, oblivion. Belief systems amplify this uncertainty. Fear of post-mortem consequence ensures obedience even in solitude. A being watched only in life might disobey in private. A being watched eternally does not. The afterlife becomes a continuation of hierarchy. Kings become gods. Gods judge souls. Punishment and reward mirror earthly power structures. Heaven resembles palace life. Hell resembles labor and torment. The system persists beyond the grave in imagination, ensuring loyalty until the final breath. The tablets describe disputes among the Anunnaki regarding humanity's fate after death. Some favored total annihilation to prevent autonomy. Others favored continuation with control. The compromise appears to have been cyclical existence with memory suppression. Humans die, forget, and return. Whether literal or symbolic, the effect is the same: continuity without accumulation. Fear of scarcity is equally powerful: hunger, homelessness, social exclusion. These threats keep humans working long after basic needs are met. Modern economies manufacture scarcity through artificial constraints. Resources exist, but access is controlled. Fear ensures compliance. Fear of other humans maintains division. Tribes, nations, ideologies. An external enemy unites internally while preventing broader unity. The tablets reference wars between cities as manageable disturbances. Conflict consumes excess population, redirects frustration, and reinforces authority. Media magnifies this mechanism. Danger is omnipresent. Threats are constant. Anxiety becomes background noise. A population under continuous low-level fear is pliable. It accepts surveillance, restriction, and sacrifice readily. The biology of fear supports this. Stress hormones impair memory consolidation and abstract reasoning. They favor immediate action over reflection. Under stress, humans revert to habitual behavior. Control systems exploit this. Stability depends on keeping populations slightly afraid, but not overwhelmed. The tablets suggest that early overseers understood human neurochemistry intuitively. They observed behavior. They adjusted conditions. They learned what worked. Modern neuroscience confirms their effectiveness. Fear also shapes identity. Humans cling to roles that provide security. Deviating risks exclusion. Conformity becomes survival strategy. This suppresses innovation at the level that matters most. Worldview. The most potent fear is fear of meaninglessness. Humans need purpose. The system provides it in controlled forms: work, nation, belief. Without these, existential dread emerges. Rather than face it, humans accept imposed purpose. The tablets never propose that fear will disappear. They show how it is repurposed. As old fears lose potency, new ones emerge. Demons become diseases. Curses become economic collapse. Gods become markets. The emotional response remains identical. Fear also distorts time perception. Anxious beings live in the future, anticipating threat. Presence dissolves. Awareness shrinks. The present moment, where insight arises, becomes inaccessible. This is critical. Awareness requires calm. Practices that cultivate calm threaten control. Stillness, meditation, contemplation. These reduce fear response. They expand perception. Historically, such practices were confined to controlled settings or elites. Widespread calm would destabilize productivity. Modern society reframes calm as inefficiency. Rest is guilt-inducing. Silence is uncomfortable. Idleness is suspect. Fear of wasting time keeps people busy. Busyness prevents awareness. The tablets hint that humanity's creators feared human awakening more than rebellion. Rebellion can be crushed. Awakening spreads quietly. It does not require organization. It requires clarity. Fear suppresses clarity. Trauma is particularly effective. Traumatized populations dissociate. Memory fragments. Trust erodes. Authority fills the void. History is filled with traumatic resets. Each one deepens dependency. Even love is conditioned by fear. Fear of abandonment, loss, inadequacy. Relationships become sources of anxiety rather than liberation. Attachment replaces connection. Control seeps into intimacy. The system does not require constant terror. Chronic mild fear suffices. Worry about bills. Worry about status. Worry about health. These concerns occupy mental bandwidth continuously. Insight requires unused capacity. The tablets do not moralize fear. They document its utility. Fear works. It has worked for millennia. It adapts seamlessly to culture and technology. The unsettling implication is that fear is not a bug in human society. It is a feature, one that stabilizes the entire structure. If fear were removed, even partially, the system would wobble. Productivity would decline. Authority would be questioned. Values would shift. That risk is unacceptable. So fear persists. It is normalized. It is defended. Humans teach it to their children. Stories, warnings, rules. Safety becomes virtue. Risk becomes vice. And yet fear is exhausting. It drains vitality. It erodes joy. It creates the dissatisfaction that never fully resolves. The system balances fear carefully, enough to control, not enough to collapse. The tablets leave no instruction for overcoming fear. They simply show that where fear exists, control follows naturally. Where fear fades, something unpredictable emerges. That unpredictability is the one variable the system cannot tolerate. And so fear remains at the center of human experience, quietly governing choices, beliefs, and lives. Fear keeps the machine stable. Fear keeps the cycle intact. Fear ensures that humanity continues to function exactly as designed. While fear stabilizes the system, hope is what keeps it moving. The tablets imply this dual mechanism subtly, showing that control is never maintained through despair alone. Total hopelessness collapses productivity. Hope, carefully managed, becomes fuel. It directs effort forward, defers satisfaction, and justifies endurance. Humanity is taught not merely to fear loss, but to believe reward lies just beyond reach. Hope is always positioned in the future. Better harvests, better rulers, better technologies, better lives for the next generation. The present is framed as sacrifice, the future as fulfillment. This temporal displacement ensures continuous labor. Humans work today for promises tomorrow that rarely arrive. The tablets describe this pattern in early mythic language. The gods promise prosperity if rituals are followed. Blessings are conditional. Obedience precedes reward. When reward fails to materialize, the explanation is insufficient devotion, not false promise. Responsibility shifts downward. Modern society refines this mechanism. Success stories are amplified. Exceptions become examples. Those who rise within the system are showcased as proof that it works. The millions who do not are rendered invisible. Hope survives statistically even when outcomes are rare. Progress narratives reinforce this. History is portrayed as a steady ascent. Each era is better than the last. Suffering is framed as temporary. Critique becomes impatience. To question progress is to be pessimistic. Optimism becomes moral obligation. Hope also personalizes control. Humans internalize ambition. Goals are individualized. Career advancement, personal growth, self-optimization. Collective liberation fades from view. Each person chases a private future. isolating effort and preventing coordination. The tablets hint that early overseers encouraged competition subtly. Rivalry increases output. Comparison motivates effort. Division prevents unity. Modern systems intensify this through metrics, rankings, and constant comparison. Social status becomes visible. Insecurity drives productivity. Hope is also embedded in identity. People believe they are becoming something. Successful, enlightened, fulfilled. Becoming replaces being. The present is never enough. Contentment is postponed. This postponement ensures restlessness. Even spiritual hope follows this pattern. Enlightenment is deferred. Salvation lies after death. Awakening requires lifetimes. Humans endure suffering now for transcendence later. The present moment remains instrumental, not sufficient. The tablets never depict fulfillment as a human state. They depict function. When humans receive gifts, they increase productivity. When they receive promises, they increase compliance. Hope is never meant to be satisfied. It is meant to persist. The system calibrates hope carefully. Too little leads to despair. Too much breeds independence. The ideal state is anticipation without arrival. This balance is maintained culturally through stories, institutions, and expectations. Education reinforces deferred hope. Children are told effort now leads to success later. Years of preparation precede reward. When reward fails to match expectation, blame returns to the individual. The structure remains unquestioned. Hope also masks exploitation. Long hours are justified by future payoff. Sacrifice is romanticized. Burnout is framed as temporary. Recovery is promised, not delivered. People endure far more when they believe it is temporary. The tablets imply that even the Anunnaki understood the danger of human hope, turning inward. When Enki gave knowledge freely, it empowered humans directly. When hope became internal rather than external, control weakened. This is why internal fulfillment was discouraged. Modern society discourages deep satisfaction. Content people consume less, compete less, and question more. Dissatisfaction drives growth. Growth sustains systems. Hope keeps dissatisfaction productive rather than revolutionary. Technology accelerates this cycle. New tools promise liberation. Automation promises freedom from labor. Connectivity promises community. Each delivers partial benefits while introducing new dependencies. Hope transfers seamlessly to the next innovation. The future becomes crowded with promises: technological singularity, space colonization, artificial intelligence solving human problems. These visions inspire effort now. Their realization remains distant. Meanwhile, the present system persists. The tablets describe return myths. Gods will come back, order will be restored, justice will arrive. These myths pacify populations. Waiting replaces acting. The promise of intervention discourages autonomy. Even political systems use hope strategically. Elections promise change. Change is incremental. Disappointment follows. Hope resets. The cycle continues. Engagement replaces empowerment. The most effective hope is vague. Specific promises can be tested and fail. Vague hope endures. Things will get better. Someday. Somehow. Humans cling to this belief even when evidence contradicts it. Hope also softens fear. Fear alone paralyzes. Hope mobilizes. Together they create controlled motion. Fear pushes. Hope pulls. The system moves forward without resistance. The tablets never suggest that hope will lead to liberation. They suggest it will maintain order. Hope motivates labor. Fear prevents rebellion. Memory resets. Cycles continue. The tragedy is not that hope exists, but that it is externalized. Humans hope for conditions to change rather than awareness to shift. They wait for systems to improve rather than questioning why they exist. Internal hope, the hope rooted in present awareness rather than future reward, threatens control. It dissolves fear. It reduces dependence. It ends striving. Such hope is rare. It is not cultivated. The system thrives on striving, becoming, achieving, arriving. The finish line moves constantly. Satisfaction is brief. Desire renews. Work resumes. The tablets record this not as cruelty, but as efficiency. A motivated workforce is a productive workforce. Hope is the most renewable resource available. Humanity continues to build, compete, and endure, propelled by futures that never quite arrive. The system does not need to promise freedom. It only needs to promise improvement. As long as hope points outward and forward, the present remains a place of work, not realization. And so hope, like fear, becomes a pillar of containment, sustaining the cycle with quiet elegance. Hope keeps humanity moving. Fear keeps it in line. Together, they ensure the design holds. If fear anchors behavior and hope propels it forward, then identity is what locks both in place. The tablets imply that once humans accepted fixed identities, control became nearly effortless. Identity creates boundaries within the mind. It tells a person who they are, what they are worth, and where they belong. Once internalized, identity enforces limits more reliably than any external rule. Early humans were defined by function: worker, scribe, priest, ruler. Roles were not temporary, they were inherited. Birth determined destiny. The tablets describe lineages assigned to tasks, families bound to temples, bloodlines tied to authority. Identity stabilized labor distribution. One did not choose a role. One embodied it. Modern society claims to reject this rigidity, yet identity has multiplied rather than dissolved. National identity, professional identity, political identity, cultural identity, psychological identity, each offers belonging in exchange for limitation. Humans defend these identities fiercely because losing them feels like annihilation. Identity narrows perception automatically. Information that supports identity is accepted. Information that threatens it is rejected. This filtering happens below conscious awareness. Control no longer requires censorship. Identity performs the task internally. The tablets suggest that fragmentation of identity was deliberate. Humans were divided into groups that competed rather than cooperated. Unity threatened control. Division preserved it. Each group believed its identity was essential, sacred, and threatened by others. Language reinforces this. Pronouns create separation. Labels define worth. Humans speak of us and them instinctively. This reflex overrides empathy and insight. Conflict becomes inevitable. Energy is spent defending identity rather than questioning structure. Even personal identity is unstable. People define themselves by achievements, possessions, relationships. When these change, identity collapses, producing anxiety and fear. This fragility keeps humans invested in maintaining roles even when they are harmful. The tablets never describe humans as having intrinsic value. Value is always contextual: usefulness, loyalty, obedience. Identity is performance-based. Modern systems echo this. Productivity defines worth. Success legitimizes existence. Failure is shameful. Psychological identities deepen control. Diagnoses categorize behavior. Labels explain suffering without addressing cause. A person becomes their condition. This provides explanation, but also enclosure. Identity replaces inquiry. Spiritual identity functions similarly. Believer, seeker, enlightened, saved. These identities offer meaning, but also hierarchy. Spiritual progress becomes competition. Awakening becomes status. The ego survives under new names. The tablets imply that early overseers discouraged humans from seeing themselves as consciousness itself. Identity anchored awareness to form. Form ages, suffers, dies. Consciousness remains unnoticed. This misidentification ensures fear of death persists. Modern neuroscience confirms that the sense of self is constructed. It arises from patterns of memory, sensation, and narrative. It is not fixed, yet society treats it as absolute. This misunderstanding is exploited continuously. Media amplifies identity conflict. Outrage sustains engagement. Algorithms reward division. People are sorted into camps. Dialogue collapses. Nuance disappears. Identity warfare replaces understanding. Even resistance becomes identity. Rebel, skeptic, outsider. These identities feel liberating but often reinforce separation. The system absorbs them easily. Opposition that identifies itself remains predictable. The most destabilizing insight is the fluidity of identity. When identity loosens, fear weakens, hope internalizes, awareness expands. Such states are rare and often temporary. The system discourages them subtly. Education reinforces identity early. Children are sorted, graded, labeled. Success and failure become personal traits rather than situational outcomes. Self-worth ties to performance. Identity hardens. The tablets suggest that identity fixation was one of humanity's greatest limitations. Beings who see themselves as roles cannot see the system assigning those roles. Awareness collapses into function. The modern emphasis on self-expression appears liberating but often reinforces identity. Expression becomes brand. Authenticity becomes performance. The self is curated. Surveillance is voluntary. Identity also anchors fear of death. To die is to lose identity. Consciousness without identity is unimaginable. This fear ensures obedience. A being that does not fear loss of self is uncontrollable. Ancient traditions that pointed toward ego dissolution were tightly regulated. Mysteries were restricted. Knowledge was fragmented. Experiences were contextualized to prevent integration. Awareness without identity was too dangerous. The tablets never describe a mass dissolution of identity. They describe management. Humans are encouraged to adopt identities that serve stability. When identities clash, conflict consumes excess energy. Modern society celebrates diversity of identity while maintaining uniformity of structure. Differences are superficial. The underlying system remains untouched. This is efficient. Diversity distracts from unity. The sense of I becomes the ultimate containment. Everything is filtered through it. Fear is personal. Hope is personal. Suffering is personal. Systemic causes fade. When humans attempt to escape the system, they often seek new identities rather than dissolving the old. New roles replace old ones. The cage is redecorated. The tablets imply that true freedom would require abandoning fixed identity entirely. Not replacing it, but seeing through it. This is never encouraged. It cannot be institutionalized. It cannot be commodified. Identity gives humans a place, but not peace. It offers belonging, but not freedom. It provides meaning, but not truth. Yet it is defended fiercely because, without it, uncertainty emerges. The system thrives on this defense. A population defending its identities will never unite beyond them. Awareness remains fragmented. control remains invisible. The greatest trick was not convincing humanity it was powerless, but convincing it that it was someone. And as long as humans remain someone rather than awareness itself, the design holds firm. Identity keeps fear relevant. Identity keeps hope external. Identity keeps memory fragmented. Identity is the lock that secures all other mechanisms in place. The tablets leave this unsaid, but the pattern is unmistakable. Control did not require domination of bodies alone. It required occupation of the self. And once the self was defined, the rest followed naturally. By the time identity hardened and hope was externalized, the final containment no longer needed to be physical, biological, or even psychological. It became perceptual. Reality itself was framed in a way that made alternatives invisible. The tablets never use modern language for this, but they describe it clearly through consequence. Humans did not merely obey rules. They accepted a version of reality where those rules made sense. Perception determines possibility. What cannot be perceived cannot be pursued. The human perceptual range is narrow, and not only biologically. Cultural perception is even more constrained. Humans are taught what is real, what matters, and what is impossible. These assumptions shape every decision unconsciously. Materialism becomes the dominant lens. Only what can be measured is considered real. Consciousness is treated as a byproduct, not a foundation. Inner experience is secondary to external validation. This worldview strips humans of their most destabilizing power: direct awareness. The tablets imply that early humans interacted with reality differently. Symbol, ritual, and myth were not entertainment. They were interfaces. Over time, these interfaces were flattened into superstition. Meaning was reduced to matter. Mystery became ignorance. This shift was not accidental. A species disconnected from inner perception is easier to manage. Modern science reinforces this disconnection unintentionally. Reductionism explains parts but obscures wholes. Complexity is broken down until context disappears. Knowledge increases while understanding shrinks. Humans know how things work, but not why they exist. Even time perception is distorted. The present moment is overlooked. Attention is pulled backward by regret or forward by anxiety. Presence, where insight emerges, is rare. The tablets suggest that presence was once valued. Modern life eradicates it. Perceptual overload replaces depth. Endless images, sounds, notifications. The mind skims rather than contemplates. Awareness becomes shallow. This is ideal for control. Deep perception leads to pattern recognition. Shallow perception reacts without insight. Dreaming, imagination, intuition, once respected, are dismissed. Children are trained out of them. Practicality replaces wonder. Efficiency replaces exploration. Humans forget how to perceive without filters. The tablets never describe humans perceiving the Anunnaki as gods initially. They perceived them as powerful beings. Divinity was assigned later, as perception narrowed and memory faded. This transformation shows how perception defines interpretation. Modern humans perceive authority similarly. Institutions appear abstract, inevitable, omnipresent. They are treated as forces of nature rather than human constructs. This perception prevents challenge. Even suffering is perceived through conditioned lenses. Pain is individualized. Structural causes are ignored. Solutions focus on adaptation rather than transformation. Humans learn to cope rather than question. The concept of normality becomes a weapon. Anything outside it is marginalized. Normal work hours, normal stress levels, normal exhaustion. When abnormal becomes normal, awareness dulls. The tablets imply that the ultimate success of the system was making humans mistake containment for existence. Life as experienced feels complete, even when it is constrained. The possibility of another mode of being is unimaginable. Modern entertainment reinforces this. Stories rarely depict true freedom. They depict power within systems. Heroes overthrow villains but preserve structures. Liberation is personal, not collective. The imagination remains contained. Even language limits perception. Words define categories. Categories define thought. Thought defines action. Languages evolve within systems, reinforcing their assumptions. What cannot be named cannot be thought. The system does not need to hide truth. It only needs to make it imperceptible. A truth that cannot be seen might as well not exist. The tablets suggest that awakening would involve a shift in perception, not acquisition of knowledge. Seeing differently, not knowing more. This is dangerous because perception cannot be regulated easily. It spreads silently. Modern society works tirelessly to prevent such shifts. Education, media, work schedules, social norms, everything fills perceptual space. Silence becomes rare. Stillness feels threatening. When perception does shift, even briefly, the effect is profound. Fear loosens, identity softens, hope collapses into presence. These states are fleeting but memorable. They are often described as the most real moments of life. The system responds by labeling them anomalies, mystical experiences, mental episodes, temporary states. They are not integrated, they are isolated. The tablets never describe sustained perceptual awakening among humans. They describe moments, interventions, conflicts. The system adapts. Perception resets. Modern technology could facilitate perceptual expansion, but it is optimized for engagement, not awareness. Screens capture attention. Algorithms shape focus. Perception is guided externally. The final containment is thus not walls or laws, but worldview. Humans live inside assumptions they did not choose. They act within boundaries they do not see. The system is so complete that it does not require belief in ancient creators. It functions independently. Even if the Anunnaki never return, the design persists. The most radical act would not be rebellion, acquisition, or reform. It would be perceiving reality without inherited filters, seeing what is rather than what is presented. The tablets do not offer instructions for this. They simply show that when perception changes, everything else follows. Fear dissolves. Hope collapses. Identity loosens. Memory reconnects. Perhaps this is why the tablets are fragmented, why full translation is rare, why context is missing. A complete picture would alter perception, not belief. And belief is manageable. Perception is not. As long as humans perceive reality through the lenses provided, the system holds. They will work, strive, fear, hope, and repeat. They will call it life. The design does not require loyalty. It requires blindness. And blindness, once normalized, becomes indistinguishable from sight. The prison was never the planet. It was the way humanity learned to see. Nothing ends. That is the quiet truth embedded in the tablets once all the myth, ritual, and symbolism are stripped away. Systems that truly succeed do not require conclusions. They require continuation. Humanity was not designed to reach an endpoint, to achieve resolution, or to arrive at freedom as a final state. It was designed to operate, cycle, and renew its function indefinitely. By this stage, the architecture is complete. Biology limits lifespan. Memory resets each generation. Fear stabilizes behavior. Hope directs effort forward. Identity locks perception in place. Environment restricts movement. Culture normalizes exhaustion. Technology accelerates dependence. None of these mechanisms function alone. Together they form a closed loop so seamless that it feels like nature itself. The most striking feature of this design is that it doesn't collapse under scrutiny. Skepticism doesn't weaken it. Criticism does not dismantle it. Even disbelief fails to disrupt it. Humans can reject gods, myths, and creators entirely and still live precisely as intended. The system does not require worship, it requires participation. Participation is ensured through necessity. Survival demands engagement. To eat, one must work. To work, one must conform. To conform, one must accept limits. This is not enforced by decree. It emerges organically once the structure is internalized. A human who stops participating does not threaten the system. They simply fall out of it and disappear. The tablets imply that this outcome was anticipated. Direct control was never meant to be permanent. Self-regulation is more efficient. A species that enforces its own limits consumes fewer resources to manage. The overseers withdraw. The machine continues. Civilizations rise and fall within this framework. Each believes itself unique, advanced, enlightened. Each repeats the same structures: hierarchy, labor extraction, belief systems, controlled knowledge, fear-driven motivation. When collapse occurs, it is interpreted as failure rather than reset. Reconstruction begins. The cycle renews. Even technological progress does not break the pattern. Tools become more powerful, but purpose remains unchanged. Automation promises liberation, yet increases dependency. Connectivity promises unity, yet deepens fragmentation. Knowledge explodes, but wisdom stagnates. The system absorbs every innovation without altering its core. Humanity often imagines that awareness alone is enough, that seeing the problem guarantees escape. The tablets suggest otherwise. Awareness without continuity dissipates. A single generation cannot dismantle a system designed across millennia, especially when memory resets before insight accumulates. This is why awakening experiences, however profound, rarely transform societies. They change individuals temporarily. Without structural memory, without collective integration, the system reasserts itself. The awakened return to work, bills, schedules, identities. The moment fades. The most effective systems do not suppress awakening violently. They allow it in isolated doses. Small enough to be contained. Personal, not collective. Mystical, not practical. Inspiring, not destabilizing. The tablets do not depict humanity as incapable of freedom. They depict freedom as irrelevant to the system's purpose. Freedom does not optimize output. Awareness does not guarantee productivity. Fulfillment does not scale efficiently. Stability does. This reframes the question entirely. The issue is not whether humanity was enslaved, but whether it was ever meant to be anything else. The system does not fail humanity. It fulfills its own design. Even suffering serves a role. It motivates, disciplines, and distracts. Pleasure balances it just enough to prevent collapse. This oscillation keeps the machine running smoothly. Too much suffering would destroy participation. Too much pleasure would dissolve motivation. The greatest misconception humans carry is that the system is broken. that corruption, greed, or incompetence are flaws. The tablets suggest these are features. Imperfection prevents stagnation. Tension sustains movement. The design does not aim for harmony, it aims for endurance, and it has endured. For thousands of years, humanity has labored, reproduced, built, destroyed, believed, doubted, and repeated. Empires vanish. Languages die. Gods are replaced. The pattern persists. A design that survives this long is not accidental. Whether the original architects still exist becomes irrelevant. Their presence would add nothing. Their absence changes nothing. The structure is complete. If there is an exit, it does not resemble escape. Leaving the planet would not break the pattern. Taking systems with us would extend it. Exporting the design to new worlds would simply expand the enclosure. The only conceivable disruption would not be external at all. It would not involve overthrowing institutions or acquiring power. It would involve sustained perceptual shift across generations. Memory without reset. Awareness without identity fixation. Presence without fear. This would undermine every mechanism simultaneously. The tablets do not record such an event. They record continuity. Perhaps that silence is the final message. Not a warning, not a prophecy, but an observation. Systems that work do not announce themselves. They do not dramatize their success. They simply continue. Humanity remains productive. The world remains organized. The machine hums. No final act, no revelation, no liberation written into history. Just a design doing exactly what it was built to do, while its creation calls it life.